Welcome, everyone. Happy Wednesday. It is Wednesday, August 16, 2023. This is our inaugural session for the series on the Blessed Beauty. The Blessed Beauty is a name for Bahá'u'lláh, and Bahá'u'lláh is going to be the subject of this series, the life of Bahá'u'lláh. It'll go over the course of 10 days. We're going to be presenting over the course of 10 days with our host and presenter, Violetta Zain, in conjunction with the Desert Rose Baha'i Institute, the Fern Foundation Academy, and the Clearwater Baha'is. We are so happy to have Violetta here joining us, and we're happy to have all of you here joining us on this session as we start on a story of the most important individual in modern history, the most important entity that's ever visited our planet for the next 1,000 years. And we're so happy to join all of you on this journey with Violetta as we explore the life of Bahá'u'lláh, the Blessed Beauty. With that being said, we welcome you as well to please visit the Desert Rose Baha'i Institute website to learn more about what it does as a school, as well as the clearwaterbaha'is.org website, where we are also hosting the Zoom link information. We have Facebook pages where we're sharing this. So we're very welcome in the context of sharing with your friends. We're happy to have your friends join and learn with us today. That being said, joining on Facebook and on YouTube, please comment. We are very happy to have your questions, and Violetta will get to them at the end of the presentation, or you can contact her directly. And her email is violettaz@gmail.com. We'll spell it out more clearly at the end of the presentation. Lastly, we just want to let you know that this session is one of 10. So we ask that as you plan, please plan for tomorrow and the day after that, for the next 10 days. We're so happy to have you. And Violetta, she's also been working on another project called the utteranceproject.com. I'll spell this one out. It is, of course, www.utterance, UTTERANCE, project, project.com. There you can find this chronology from which Violetta is sourcing from, which she created. This chronology called the Blessed Beauty is found on the utteranceproject.com, and you're more than welcome during this presentation, after the presentation, whenever you like, to view the utteranceproject.com website, where Violetta has put together this chronology and posted it for yourself and anyone you invite to learn from. With that being said, we welcome Violetta. We thank you so much for joining us here, Violetta, and making this available to the world. So with that being said, let us begin. Thank you.
Hey, wonderful. All right, let me get to my screen. So, friends, this is going to be an extraordinary journey. We're going to deep dive into the life of Baha'u'lláh collected from over 300 sources, some of them articles, some of them books. Of course, I wrote this chronology wanting to make Baha'i history sort of live and breathe. So I illustrated every little vignette with either a work of art, a digital art, when I could not find any pictures, or a photograph, or an illustration, or a painting, or a drawing, or an engraving, or a map. In all of my chronologies, the first source is always our master historian, Shori Effendi. Always. I take my cue from him. I focus on the things he focuses on. And when he says, for example, the two most important things that happened in Adrianople, I make sections out of that. So that's how I construct these chronologies. And they are always illustrated by one quote that my father always gives me, because my father is my partner in all things, and he is my guide. I always check everything with him, and this is the quote that my father sent to me when I was just beginning to write this chronology, I sent it to me on WhatsApp, took a picture of gleanings and sent it to me on WhatsApp around maybe midnight. And as soon as I got it, I knew I had my lighthouse. And this is from Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'lláh, number 20. So written by Baha'u'lláh, speaking about himself. He who is everlastingly hidden from the eyes of men can never be known except through his manifestation. And his manifestation can adduce no greater proof of the truth of his mission than the proof of his own person. And that, friends, is what we are going to look at the next 10 days. We're going to look at the person of Baha'u'lláh as the greatest proof of his mission. So this part covers the life of Baha'u'lláh from his birth in 1817 to the age of 27 years old in 1844. And the first part is, of course, the beginning, the birth of Baha'u'lláh on the 17th of November, 1817. And this, my friends, is a photograph of the very room in Tehran where Baha'u'lláh was born, from the book Land of Resplendent Glory by the International Baha'i Audiovisual Center, published in 1971. So the photograph that was available online was of a very poor quality. The image had been modified and it had lost its texture. So I ran it through several programs and created a little bit of a artistic work from it. I made more light shine through the windows because I wanted that to be very clear that a manifestation of God was being born. And I gave it the appearance of a pastel a little bit. I have a link in my chronology if you're curious as to what the original photograph looked like. So on the 12th of November, 1817, at the hour of dawn, Mirza Buzurg Waziri Noori and his wife Khadija Khanum welcomed their third child into the world, Mirza Hussein Ali of Noor. With the birth of Baha'u'lláh, an age-old prophecy was fulfilled, and 900 kilometers away in Mashhad, Sheikh Ahmad-i-Ahsa'i felt the dawning of the promised dispensation foreshadowed in the following hadith. One of the most mighty signs that shall signalize the advent of the promised hour is this: a woman shall give birth to the one who shall be her Lord. Of course, with the birth of a manifestation of God, we have the birth of prophecy fulfilled. The boy who is born on this day will later be known as Baha'u'lláh, and he is of royal Persian blood. On the side of his father, he is a descendant of Zoroaster and the Sasanian kings of Persia. Through his mother, he is descended from Abraham, through Keturah and Jesse, King David's father. To Baha'is, Baha'u'llah's birth is the fulfillment of one of the most celebrated biblical prophecies of all time, Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Baha'u'lláh will confirm this prophecy from the Bible 52 years later, thousands of kilometers away. In a tablet he will reveal for Pope Pius IX in Aqasi, where he states, "This is that peerless one foretold by Isaiah, and the comforter concerning whom the Spirit has covenanted with you. Open your eyes, O concourse of bishops, that ye may behold your Lord seated upon the throne of might and glory." And now for the Station of Baha'u'lláh, this is the first artwork of the chronology. It's an abstract interpretations of the titles of Baha'u'lláh. Baha is represented in its numerical form by the 9 vertical sections of the painting. And Baha'u'lláh, the Son of Glory, is symbolized by both the sun and the tree imagery, the branch who shall grow out of his place and shall build the temple of the Lord, and the pre-existent root, and the tree beyond which there is no passing. Every single one of the titles of Baha'u'lláh in this section from Shoghi Effendi are in the orbit of the sun, in very, very small font. Every single one of the titles of Baha'u'lláh mentioned by Shoghi Effendi is in the halo of the sun. This is a section from Shoghi Effendi, God Passes By, chapter 6, the birth of the Baha'i revelation. And it is very important for us to read this section before we move on, because we have to really cement in our minds who Baha'u'lláh is when he is born. He is already all of these things when he is born. Baha'u'lláh, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, is considered by Baha'is to be the judge, the lawgiver, and redeemer of all mankind, the organizer of the entire planet, the unifier of the children of men, the inaugurator of the long-awaited millennium, the originator of a new universal cycle, the establisher of the most great peace, the fountain of great justice, the proclaimer of the coming of age of the entire human race, the creator of a new world order, and the inspirer and founder of a world civilization. He was prophesied in the Old Testament as the everlasting Father, the Lord of hosts, come down with 10,000 saints. Hundreds of references to Baha'u'lláh can be found in most of the books of the Ancient Testament, such as the glory of the Lord, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace, the Wonderful, the Counselor, the rod come forth from the stem of Jesse, the Lord who shall be King of the earth, the branch grown out of his roots, who shall be established upon the throne of David, who will come with a strong hand, who shall judge among the nations, who shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips slay the wicked, and who shall assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. The Lord of hosts and the King of glory, the desire of all nations, and the branch who shall grow up out of this place and shall build the temple of the Lord. The Alpha and the Omega, the Lord of the vineyard, the glory of God, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. For Shia Islam, he is considered to be the return of Imam Hussein. For Sunni Islam, Baha'u'lláh is none other than the descendant of the Spirit of God, Jesus Christ. Baha'u'lláh is the Shah Bahram of Zoroastrians. For the Hindus, Baha'u'lláh is the immaculate reincarnation of Krishna, the most great spirit and the 10th avatar. And Baha'u'lláh is not only the 5th Buddha, but he who is referred to in the prophecy attributed to Buddha himself, that a Buddha named Maitreya, the Buddha of universal fellowship, should in the fullness of time arise and reveal his boundless glory. Sheikh Ahmad-i Aqasi was a preeminent 19th century Shia Muslim theologian. He became certain in the mid-19th century that the Promised One would soon appear. He began to guide people to hidden truths and meanings. And in 1817, he followed a powerful calling to Persia, first in Yazd, then Mashhad. And he was in Iran when both Baha'u'lláh and the Bab 2 years later were born. Between 1817 and 1831 is Baha'u'llah's childhood. And this is a beautiful photograph of the house of Mirza Buzurg, the house where Baha'u'lláh was born on the 12th of November, 1817, but not the house where Abdul-Baha was born. Abdul-Baha was born in a rented house. We have no photographs of the home where Abdul-Baha was born. Abdul-Baha tells us that Baha'u'llah's mother, Khadija Khanum, was attached to Baha'u'llah as an infant to such a degree that she could not be away from him even for a moment. Abdul-Baha also says that Baha'u'llah's demeanor as a baby astonished his mother, quoting Khadija Khanum as saying, "This child never cries. He is so unlike other babies who cry and scream and are forever restless while in the nursing stage." Now, an important event takes place a year and a half to 2 years after Baha'u'lláh is born, is that his younger brother, Mirza Musa, his only faithful brother, his only brother of the same mother and same father, is born. And Mirza Musa will be with him to his death. This is not a photograph of Mirza Musa. This is a photograph of Mirza Abbas-i-Nuri, their father. It was the only place I could put it. So I wanted everyone to see a photograph of the man who was the father of Baha'u'lláh, a very handsome man with a very beautiful beard. Sometime during Baha'u'llah's childhood, and we do not know when exactly, Khadija Khanum and Mirza Buzurg welcomed another son into their home, Baha'u'llah's younger and only full brother, Mirza Musa, on whom Baha'u'lláh will bestow the title Aqai Kalim, His Eminence Kalim. Even as a nursing infant, Mirza Musa showed an extraordinary attachment to his older brother, Baha'u'lláh. The names and titles of Mirza Musa are significant. Musa, his birth name, is the Arabic name for Moses, the one who spoke to the burning bush on Mount Sinai. And Kalim, as part of the title bestowed on him by Baha'u'lláh later in life, is one of the titles of Moses, translated as he who conversed with God. Both Mirza Musa's name and his title prophesy the lifelong role he would play at Baha'u'llah's side. This is a 14th century painting, Persian painting, done in Tabriz of Muhammad receiving his first revelation from the angel Gabriel. To illustrate the story below, Baha'u'lláh recalls a childhood incident in a tablet he addressed to a Baha'i of Shiraz, which gives us a clear understanding of his keen spiritual awareness from a very young age. In the Persia of Baha'u'llah's childhood, the height of a divine's turban was thought to be proportional to their learning and wisdom. The higher the turban, the more the learned mullah or sheikh or ulama. One day, Baha'u'lláh witnessed two hugely turbaned divines expounding on theological matters to two ladies separated from them by a curtain, as was the custom. The divines were debating obscure mystical facts, such as whether or not the angel Gabriel had a higher station than the first imam's slave. Even as a child, Baha'u'lláh was astonished by their pointless argument, since it was perfectly clear to him that no one could be compared in station to the angel Gabriel, through whom the Holy Spirit had descended on the Prophet Muhammad. And this is a lovely vignette about Baha'u'llah's parents and another view of Baha'u'llah's father's stately home in Tehran. Abdul Baha tells a touching story from when Baha'u'lláh was about 7 years old and was out strolling with his parents. His mother, Khadija Khanum, admired the gracefulness of his body and remarked to his father that he was slightly short in stature. Baha'u'llah's father, Mirza Buzurg, replied, "That matters not. Do you not know how intelligent he is and what a wonderful mind he has?" Mirza Buzurg explained that Baha'u'lláh was like a flame of fire, and even as a young child, he was more mature than adults, reassuring his wife, saying that it mattered not at all if he was not tall. Abdul Baha tells us that from his earliest childhood, Baha'u'lláh distinguished himself among his relatives and friends. He was far advanced, well beyond his years in knowledge, wisdom, and intelligence, causing people to exclaim, "This child has extraordinary power." Because Baha'u'lláh was so precocious, and current superstition at the time was that precocious children like him never lived to reach maturity, people cruelly said to the parents, "Such a child will not live." This is sort of it's a collage of many different 19th century paintings and 19th century carpets, something I made because it was the way I imagined the puppet show in the story that we're about to read. Before Baha'u'lláh turned 14, an event of enormous importance took place, which not only changed Baha'u'llah's perspective forever and which he would think about for the rest of his life. In Baha'u'llah's own words, he swears that ever since that day, all the trappings of the world have seemed in the eyes of this youth akin to that same spectacle. They have never been, nor will they ever be, of any weight and consequence, be it to the extent of a grain of mustard seed. This is the story of the puppet show. One of Baha'u'llah's brothers was getting married, and on the last day of the week-long festivities, a puppet show of the play Shah Sultan Salim was presented to the wedding guests and a crowd of princes, dignitaries, and nobles. Baha'u'llah was seated in one of the upper rooms of the house watching. The plot of the play was the regal arrival of the king sentencing a thief to death, his execution, a rebellion against a king. The sound effects were loud. Blood poured from the thief's neck after his head was chopped off. A fanfare of trumpets accompanied the king. Smoke filled the stage when a volley of shots was fired to welcome him. Cannons sounded real. Baha'u'llah followed the entire play with great amazements. About 20 minutes after the play ended, a man emerged from behind the tent carrying a box under his arm, and Baha'u'llah asked him what was in the box. The puppeteer responded, all this lavish display and these elaborate devices, the king, the princes, the ministers, their pomp and glory, their might and power, everything you saw are now contained in this box. Baha'u'llah would never again see humanity's attachments to the trappings of the world in the same light. And nearly 40 years later, Baha'u'llah would recount the entirety of this childhood story in very great detail, more detail than I have provided in this story, to Ali Pasha, the Ottoman prime minister, told him a childhood story, marveling that men should pride themselves on such vanities and stating, never have I looked upon anything save that I have seen extinction before it, and God verily is a sufficient witness. This now is a very powerful section on the spiritual forces at play in the childhood of the manifestation of God. And for these, I have done most of the artwork because it would have been impossible to illustrate otherwise. So around 1822, 1823, when Baha'u'llah was about 5 or 6, he described a dream he had to his father. In the dream, Baha'u'llah, okay, so in these paintings, I decided to have a sun represent Baha'u'llah because I figured that would be the most respectful way to do it. And all of these paintings are sort of collages. And all of the assets, I drew all the assets myself. So at the age of about 5 or 6, Baha'u'llah described a dream he had to his father. In the dream, Baha'u'llah found himself in a garden. Huge birds were attacking him from every side, but they were unable to inflict harm on him. Then Baha'u'llah went into the sea, and as he was swimming, the birds of the air and the fish of the sea attacked him, and again, he was unharmed. Baha'u'llah's father summoned a man who claimed to be able to interpret dreams. The man said, this dream indicates that the child shall be the founder of a great cause, and that all the leaders and learned throughout the world will attack him, but like the birds and the fish, they shall do him no harm. He will be victorious over all. Baha'u'llah's childhood dream could clearly be said to be prophetic, so accurately did it foretell Baha'u'llah's lifelong supremacy over his enemies. And now we come to the dream of Baha'u'llah's father. When Baha'u'llah was still a child, his father dreamt that Baha'u'llah was swimming in a vast, limitless ocean, illuminated by his body's splendor. Baha'u'llah's long, jet black hair flowed profusely above the waves, and a multitude of fish gathered, each one holding the extremity of one of Baha'u'llah's hairs. The fish, fascinated by his radiance, followed him in whichever direction he swam. Despite the fish holding onto his hair, Baha'u'llah was entirely unharmed, and he moved above the waters free and unrestrained. Mirza Buzurg was so impressed by this dream that he summoned a renowned soothsayer to interpret it. The soothsayer, in a moment of prescient clarity about Baha'u'llah's future glory, declared, the limitless ocean that you have seen in your dream, O Wazir, is none other than the world of being. Single-handed and alone, your son will achieve supreme ascendancy over it. Wherever he may please, he will proceed unhindered. No one will resist his march. No one will hinder his progress. The multitude of fishes signify the turmoil which will arouse amidst the people and kindreds of the earth. Around him they will gather, and to him they will cling. Assured of the unfailing protection of the Almighty, this tumult will never harm his person, nor will his loneliness upon the sea of life endanger his safety. When the soothsayer was taken to meet Baha'u'lláh, he carefully examined his features and was charmed by his appearance, praising every trait of his countenance, stating that in every expression of Baha'u'llah's face, he could perceive a sign of his concealed glory. And he praised the child with so much admiration that Mirza Buzurg became even more passionately devoted to Baha'u'lláh and even more filled with hope and confidence in his extraordinary son. This is a magnificent story. This is the first recorded experience of prophethood that Baha'u'lláh had in his childhood. When Baha'u'lláh was a child, he read Mullah Muhammad Baqir Majlisi's account of the massacre of the tribe of Banu Qurayza, allies of the Muslim who had betrayed them in battle. And this is a painting of this exact battle. When they were brought back to Mecca, the Prophet Muhammad handed their judgment to the leader of Medinan tribe, who had the men beheaded and the women and children sold into slavery. After reading this account, Baha'u'lláh immediately became so grieved and saddened that the pen is unable to recount it. And with the ocean of forgiveness and boundless mercy before his eyes, he beseeched the one true God, exalted be his glory, at that time for that which would be the cause of universal love, fellowship, and the unity of all the peoples of the earth. Baha'u'llah's entire being was affected by reading this horrifying story, and his comportment, his speech, and thought were thrown into turmoil, a tumult that gave glad tidings of exaltations. Baha'u'llah's state of tumult was constant and uninterrupted for 12 days, after which the waves of the ocean of utterance became manifest, and the effulgences of the sun of certitude dawned. This would culminate years later at the time of his revelation in the Siyat Shal, also a 12-day period during which Baha'u'lláh would experience a state of transfiguration and would attain unto the source of joy to all mankind and be awakened to his role as a manifestation of God for today. In the tablet that Baha'u'lláh revealed, describing the profound spiritual experience that followed learning about the massacre of the Banu Qurayza tribe, Baha'u'lláh describes a desire that formed in his mind as a child to be the instrument of bringing unity and harmony to the world. In the tablet, he describes how his desire was realized from early childhood over the course of the rest of his life. The 12-day state of transfiguration Baha'u'lláh experienced can only be described as an early childhood experience of his future station of prophethood. And now we come to Baha'u'lláh as a young man, which means over the age of 14. This is a painting of the Shah of Persia accompanied by his executioners as a perfect illustration of the story below. When Baha'u'lláh was a youth, he attended a meeting where the celebrated Sufi teacher Mirza Nazar Ali of Ghazvin, highly regarded by the Shah, was speaking rather arrogantly about himself. Mirza Nazar Ali said, "Should my servant come to me and say that Jesus the Christ was at the door asking for me, my detachment is such that I would express no wish to see him." At these conceited words, the audience murmured assent, yes, yes, and flattery, or kept silent. Only Baha'u'lláh spoke up. One of the few things that raised anger in Baha'u'lláh in his youth was any disrespect towards any messenger of God. Although even in anger, when Baha'u'lláh admonished the offender, it was with kindness and calm. He turned to Mirza Nazar Ali and said, "You are very close to the person of the sovereign, and he is very devoted to you. But if the chief executioner with 10 of his men were to come to this door and tell you that the monarch wanted to see you, would you take it calmly or would you be perturbed? Mirza Nazar Ali paused for a while and then replied, duh, in truth, I would feel anxious. To which Baha'u'lláh replied, leaving the entire assembly speechless, in that case, you should not make such an assumption. So if you're going to tremble of fear because the executioner is here with 10 men, that's 11 human beings, and you're going to feel anxious, then you should not say that if Jesus Christ was at your door, you wouldn't care, because he is a manifestation of God. This is a garden at Baha'u'llah's house in Shimran, outside of Tehran, in the early 1900s. These are the types of surroundings that Baha'u'llah dearly loved. He was a great lover of nature and outdoor life, and you can see the beauty of nature. And this is what his childhood was like before he became a Babi, just filled with what I can best describe as fairy tale nature, springs, valleys, mountains, forests, flowers, islands, birds, nightingales, roses. I mean, and just to think that that being so sensitive to nature would be in dark dungeons like the Siachal and Aqqa, where he didn't see the color green for 9 years. Can you imagine the suffering when this was his childhood? As Baha'u'llah grew through his childhood to his adolescence, his extraordinary innate qualities shone through. Baha'u'llah was extremely kind and generous, and he was a great lover of outdoor life, spending most of his time in gardens and fields. He had a strong power of attraction felt by all. People always crowded around him. Ministers and people of the court would surround him, and the children also were devoted to him. When he was only 13 or 14, Baha'u'llah became renowned for his learning. Not only could he fluently discuss any subject or solve any problem he was faced with, but he also discussed matters with Muslim clergy in large gatherings, explaining intricate subjects of religious doctrine, and he always listened to with profound interest. So this is just absolutely wonderful. This is from the British Library. It is an extraordinary photograph of Baha'u'llah's childhood calligraphic practice. So this is actually Baha'u'llah's homework that we're looking at, his practicing, and it's very beautiful for a child. And if I'm not mistaken, this is Shikasti. It's a type of script, I think. I don't know. I think there might be more than one type of script, but I can recognize some of this Shikasti here. Now, as a teenager, Baha'u'llah did not attend school. He already had the innate capacity to solve most of the arduous problems for those who came to see him. And in any meeting he attended, whether it was scientific gathering or a theological discussion, Baha'u'llah was inevitably the authority for explaining the most intricate and abstruse questions that were posed. Baha'u'llah testifies that he never had a formal education. The learning currents amongst men I studied not. Their schools I entered not. Ask of the city wherein I dwelt, that you may be well assured that I am not of them who speak falsely. In other words, his knowledge was always innate. In the Persia of the 19th century, children of noble families, such as Baha'u'lláh, were trained and educated by tutors, brought in the home for personal education in matters that befitted their station in life. These subjects were etiquette, good manners, horse riding, shooting, wielding a sword, calligraphy, exposure to great classical poetry and literature, reading the Quran, and rarely anything beyond these subjects. Around 1831, by the time Baha'u'llah, then known as Mirza Hussein Ali, was 14 years old, the age of maturity in Islamic society, the fame of this perfect youth and his exceptional disposition had spread and were noticed in all circles. Baha'u'llah exhibited not only a keen intelligence and an alert mind, but those qualities were associated with a stainless, upright character. He was deeply compassionate, generous, and benevolent. As a teenager, Baha'u'llah's rare understanding, total mastery of argument, and unparalleled powers of exposition were well known. He mastered rhetoric and logic while never exerting assertiveness or argumentativeness, rather displaying constant courtesy and patience. And if you were here for the chronology of the Bab, which is now available in its entirety online, you will remember how often courtesy came as a virtue describing the Bab in his childhood, his adolescence, his youth, all the way to his martyrdom. This is another photograph of Shimran. This is Morg Mahali, the Baha'u'llah's summer residence in Shimran, of which we saw a picture earlier, on the lower slopes of the Elborz Mountains. And why this was a summer residence was because Tehran would get extremely hot during the summer, and the noble people who had second residences would go up into the mountains very high up where it was fresh. And this is why the summer residence is on a slope of a mountain. So during the summer months, Baha'u'llah often traveled to Takur, his ancestral village in Noor, Mazandaran. But sometimes he would go to a beloved mountain retreat outside Tehran in Shimran called Morg Mahali, or Abode of the Birds. And in later years, Baha'u'llah will stand on Mount Carmel and say that it reminded him somewhat of Morg Mahali. One year, Baha'u'llah spent the summer in Morg Mahali in a garden called the Garden of Haji Bakir. Excuse me. Sorry, excuse me 1 second. Apologies. I had a little bit of a coughing fit. I'm sorry. The Garden of Haji Bakir. The house he lived in for that summer was 3 stories high and overlooked a small lake. In the middle of the lake was a large bedrock platform circled by vegetation, in the center of which one could pitch a tent. Don't know about you, but I would love to visit that place. So this is also Baha'u'llah's youth, but none of the vignettes have any years on them. None of them have any real age on them. So what I did is, for Baha'u'llah's youth, I split it up for you into his youth in Tehran, where we just looked at, where you get the feeling that most of the time he went into the countryside when he could, he escaped the city. And then now the other part of his childhood is really, what was Baha'u'llah's childhood like in Noor, his ancestral home? Because you also get a sense that although Baha'u'llah was born in Tehran, his attachment to Noor was much stronger than his attachment to the city. He would probably, I mean, yeah, I don't want to spoil it. There's a little surprise in store here, so I'll just let you discover it. Baha'u'llah's father and their ancestors were originally from Takur, in the district of Noor, which means light, in the province of Mazandaran. Now, Mazandaran, just a little aside, Mazandaran is high mountains. Well, a lot of Iran has high mountains, but Mazandaran has high mountains, and then it has the Caspian Sea. So it's kind of like a geological accident. You know, you have that sea level and then the mountains pushed close to each other. And it gives Mazandaran some of the most stunning vistas in all of Iran. And that most beautiful of all of places, with very famous for their lemons and famous for their roses and famous for their beauty of their climate. And it's just wonderful. That's where Baha'u'llah's ancestors were from. So Mirza Buzurg had a palatial house built in Takur, which is this house here. And Baha'u'llah always spent part of the year in the spring or summer months in his family's village. In the winter months, the family retired to Dar Kala, also in Mazandaran, but like I said, closer to the Caspian Sea. So you see, they're not spending that much time in Tehran, because the winter they're spending in the Caspian Sea because the weather is balmy. And then in the spring and summer, they're in the mountains outside of Tehran or in Noor. And so they lived a life of wealthy people who get to travel according to the weather, you know, whereas poor people, they have to stay in the same place, and the weather changes, you know. So it really was, he was the son of a minister, and they had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful life. So so this is, I looked everywhere for photographs of Yalrud, which is where this story takes place. And I could not find any. But this image, this modern image here, is from Lar National Park. And the place where the picture was taken is about 12 kilometers, so like 8 miles south of Yalroud. So this is what Baha'u'llah's homeland looked like. It's meant really to convey the beauty of Baha'u'llah's native region, its verdure, its rugged mountainous terrain. So in his youth, whenever Baha'u'llah traveled to Thakur, he usually stopped for a little while in the nearby village of Yalroud to visit the celebrated and famous mujtahid, or expert in Muslim law, in Islamic law, Mirza Muhammad Taqi Noori, a distant relative of his. One day when Baha'u'llah arrived, Mirza Muhammad Taqi Noori was lecturing 200 of his disciples and asked them to resolve a conundrum, comparing Fatimeh and the daughter of Mary, the mother of Jesus. The students were unable to answer, but Baha'u'llah gave a very brief and very convincing explanation that the conundrum basically didn't exist because no woman could be compared to Fatimeh, and besides, Mary never had a daughter. Mirza Muhammad Taqi Noori rebuked his disciples for not having been able to answer the question despite years of scholarly training, when Baha'u'llah, who had no academic training, demonstrated his superiority over them. Once Baha'u'llah had left, the venerated mujtahid told his students about 2 dreams he had had about Baha'u'llah, a distant relative. Once, when Baha'u'llah was a child, he had dreamt that he, along with everyone else, was denied access to a house because the Qa'im, the promised one of the house of Muhammad, was speaking with Mirza Hussein Ali of Noor, Baha'u'llah. In his second dream, he had found himself in a room packed with trunks, each filled with books, and each word and every letter in these books was bejeweled. Just imagine that. The mujtahid was so dazzled by the radiance of the books and overpowered by their brilliance that he awoke. And so this is also the religious authority that Mirza Buzurg chose, Mirza Buzurg, Baha'u'llah's father, chose as the executor and trustee of his will and testament. So Baha'u'llah had a very, very acute sense of justice. And this map is an illustration of the story where you're going to see there's Tehran in green on the bottom, Afchi, Yalroud, and Thakur. So in this story, a young Baha'u'llah rides for 2 days on horseback to Tehran. He was most probably in the district of Noor at the time. And these are a few of the places that are associated with Baha'u'llah and his father. In his early teen, Baha'u'llah witnessed 3 separate occasions when a particularly cruel and unjust government tax collector accosted his father, Mirza Buzurg, demanding the payment of taxes. Unable to stand the injustice, Baha'u'llah rode his horse for 2 days until he arrived in Tehran, where he sought the dismissal of the tyrannical tax collector. And having obtained the necessary papers for his dismissal, he returned to his parents. This is Baha'u'llah as a teenager. So this is a modern view of the area around Yalroud. This is actually the village of Balade, about 6 kilometers northwest. So that's 4 miles. And this is the village where his future wife is born, Aqasi Khanum. Throughout Baha'u'llah's youth, he would often stop in Yalroud on his way to Thakur to visit his neighbor. But there was another noteworthy inhabitant of Yalroud, one who would have a great impact on Baha'u'llah's life. Yalroud was a village where Aqasi Khanum, Baha'u'llah's future wife, was born and raised. She was the daughter of Mirza Ismail of Yalroud and was only a few years younger than Baha'u'llah. Although she may have been opportunities for them to encounter each other in Yalroud, we have no record of them meeting prior to their wedding. Dun, 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 dun. The marriage of Baha'u'llah and Aqasi Khanum. It begins 3 years before their marriage, because first, 2 great families of the district of Noor are united in marriage. And I absolutely adore this tile. It's a Qajar Persian pottery tile. It's a 19th century Persian wedding scene. And it's from the Anavian Gallery. And I wrote to them because they were selling it. And I wrote to them and I said, may I please use the image in my chronology? and they gave me permission to use it. So I was very happy. In 1832, when Baha'u'lláh was 15 years old, Baha'u'llah's sister, Sari Khanum, married Mirza Mahmud. This marriage united two prominent, wealthy, and renowned families of Noor, the family of Mirza Buzurg of Takur and the family of Mirza Ismail-i Wazir of Yalrud. And locals describe the union of these two great families as wealth adding to wealth. Mirza Mahmud of Yalrud, who married Baha'u'llah's sister, Sari Khanum, had a sister himself. His sister's name was Asiya Khanum, and she was charming, vivacious, exceedingly beautiful, and displayed extraordinary spiritual attributes and perfections. As soon as Baha'u'lláh turned 18, and Asiye had come of age, she was probably around 5 years younger than him, Baha'u'llah's sister Sari Khanum arranged a match made in heaven. She asked her father to secure Asiye Khanum's hand for Baha'u'lláh. She requested that he ask Asiye Khanum's hand in marriage for Mirza Hussein Ali, her younger brother, whom we know as Baha'u'lláh. October 1835, the marriage of Baha'u'lláh and Asiye Khanum. Now this is, we are very, very, very privileged. We have original copies of the marriage, the original marriage certificates for both the Bab and Baha'u'lláh. And both the marriage certificates for the Bab and Baha'u'lláh look almost the same. They have the same format. They have a very beautiful top part, and then they have a long, long, long list. And now, this is more than a marriage certificate, more than a marriage contract. I mean, in this, it's very beautiful. They even talk about the qualities of the bride and the groom and their spiritual qualities. And I mean, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. We're very lucky to have these relics. The marriage certificate of Baha'u'lláh and Asiye Khanum provides a great deal of information. It attests to Asiye Khanum's perfections of character and specify the considerable dowry, which included 2 maidservants, 1 servant, a large sum of money, an important piece of property. Asiye Khanum's daughter, the greatest holy leaf, tells us it took 6 months for a jeweler working in her family's home to craft the jewelry for the wedding. The very buttons of the garments were made of gold inlaid with precious stones. The wedding treasures of Asiye Khanum were so extensive that 40 mules were needed to carry her possessions to Baha'u'llah's home. Now, this is just wonderful. Asiye Khanum is the accomplishment of a biblical prophecy from the Old Testament. This is an abstract illustration of, these are all cutouts from 19th century Persian women in various paintings that I processed differently. And in the center is the peerless pearl among her contemporaries, Asiye Khanum. Cannot be compared to any of these women. Asiye Khanum was very tall. She was tall, graceful, slender, with dark blue eyes, described by her daughter, the greatest holy leaf, as a pearl, a flower amongst women. So you get a sense of great breeding and the just extremely delicate features and delicate hands, just like a pearl, like a flower. Asiye Khanum was remarkably wise and intelligent, and she had the bearing and the loveliness of a queen. Her character was extraordinary, and wherever she went, her presence created a penetrating atmosphere of love, happiness, and gentle courtesy. That's the effect she had on people. She was full of consideration for everyone, gentle, remarkably unselfish, and displayed in her every act the loving kindness of her pure heart. Asiye Khanum was infinitely more than the saintly young woman which I have just described. She possesses a lofty station in the history of religion. Asiye Khanum is the manifestation of a 2,500-year-old biblical prophecy. And Abdul Baha confirmed that the book of Isaiah, chapter 54, verses 2 to 5, speak about his mother, Asiye Khanum, and her marriage to Baha'u'lláh, written 2,500 years ago. Here it is. Enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thine habitations. Spare not, lengthen thy cords, and strengthen thy stakes, for thou shalt break forth on the right hand and on the left, and thy seed shall inherit the Gentiles, and make desolate cities to be inhabited. For thy maker is thine husband, the Lord of hosts is his name, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel, the God of the whole earth shall he be called. And so after the wedding, these are what the first 9 years of Baha'u'lláh and Nawab or Asiya Khanum's life were. This is just a picture of Tehran taken about 50 years later. Asiya Khanum was called by the title Nawabe. You know, sometimes in English you say a Nabab. He acted like a Nabab, meaning like a prince, kind of. It's a term that comes from the Persian, basically. Nawabe is the feminine form of an honorific title meaning highness. But the fact that Asiya Khanum was given this title in early childhood clearly indicates that she emanated great nobility and graciousness from her earliest years. Baha'u'lláh chose to address her not as Nawabe, the feminine form. He chose to address her as the masculine form, Nawab. That's generally a masculine term. It is a mark of great respect on behalf of Baha'u'lláh to Asiya Khanum. And that is the reason I chose to call her Asiya Khanum in this entire chronology, is because I wanted to leave Nawab as the title between the Bab and Asiya Khanum. I didn't want to use it. I wanted that to be theirs. So I made the choice of calling her Asiya Khanum in this chronology. In the early years of their married life, Baha'u'lláh and Asiya Khanum shared their time between Tehran, Takur, and Yalrud. Traveling those 50 to 70 kilometers by mule was extremely arduous. So any journey to Noor would have resulted in a lengthy stay. Asiya Khanum and Baha'u'lláh, as young people from very noble lineages, lived comfortable lives. But it is believed their first 2 children were boys, born around 1839 to 1840, but tragically, both died in infancy. And so it's an interesting coincidence that Baha'u'lláh is the third born of his father and mother and the first to survive, and Abdul Baha is the third born of his mother and father and the first to survive. Baha'u'lláh and Asiya Khanum were an exceptional couple. They shunned all the activities most people of their rank and social position relished, such as state functions, dinners, banquets, social ceremonies, weddings, frivolous pastimes, and acquiring luxuries. Instead, they devoted themselves to charitable pursuits, an important component of their Muslim faith, because let's not forget they were Muslim. And they cared deeply for the poor and for all those who were unhappy or in trouble. No one was ever turned away from their home, and all newcomers were welcomed with kind hospitality. Poor women constantly sought the company and counsel of Asiya Khanum. They poured their hearts out to her, telling her their stories of woes, and found themselves comforted and consoled by her loving helpfulness. Baha'u'lláh and Asiya Khanum's acts of service earned them the most wonderful nicknames ever. They were not widely known as the father of the poor and the mother of consolation. Those are the parents of Abdul Baha. And that is how they spent the first 9 years of their marriage when their first 2 babies passed away, until they had Abdul Baha. But before that, tribulations or trials assail the family in the form of Haji Mirza Aqasi and his opposition to Baha'u'llah's father. So very shortly after the wedding, Haji Mirza Aqasi ruined Baha'u'llah's father. This is an engraving from a very famous engraver who did many engravings of Persia, which we're going to see over and over again in the chronology. It is the Gate of Shimran in Tehran. And friends, this is the closest we're going to get to having an image of Baha'u'llah's home that he rented after his father was ruined, because it was a rented house. So we don't have a picture. Sometime in 1835, Haji Mirza Aqasi got his hands on a letter that had been written by Baha'u'llah's father, Mirza Buzurg. And in the letter, Mirza Buzurg was condemning him for the murder of a dear friend of his, a celebrated figure called Qaim Maqam. And this provoked Haji Mirza Aqasi. He was a very angry man. He was a very jealous man. He was basically bouquet of all of the vices and faults that you could possibly imagine in a person, all rolled into one nasty little package. And he died a terrible death. Good for him. Anyway, so one of his main traits was he was a very vengeful person. So because Baha'u'llah's father had mentioned that he had a role in the murder of one of his friends, or he was condemning him for it, he had Mirza Buzurg dismissed from his governorship of Burujird and Luristan, 2 provinces, and he canceled his annual allowance, the only revenue that Baha'u'llah's father had. So he went from being rich to poor in the snap of a finger. Haji Mirza Aqasi also put pressure on Mirza Buzurg's last wife, Diayu Sultani, the daughter of Fath Ali Shah, the previous Shah, to divorce him. So he was in dire financial straits. He was forced to sell and mortgage his properties. And then once she obtained a divorce, his wife's terms were so exorbitant that Mirza Buzurg couldn't pay her back. And she had him beaten and tortured until he sold everything he owned, including his palatial complex of houses in Tehran, all their expensive carpets and furnishings. And Mirza Buzurg moved into one of his wife's houses for 4 years before retiring to Iraq, where he died 4 years later. So he was completely destroyed for a comment in a letter. He was destroyed. It was like he carpet bombed the life of another person. I mean, destroyed him to the point where he died within 4 years. Sometime after October 1835, Baha'u'llah, then newly married, rented a house close to his father near the Gate of Shimran. So in this, like on the other side of the walls, because this is probably the Gate of Shimran from outside of Tehran. So on the other side of the walls. And he moved in with his wife, Asiye Khanum, his mother, Khadija Khanum, who no longer had a place to stay, and the rest of his stepmothers, brothers, and sisters. Baha'u'llah would spend the rest of his years in Tehran in this house where the rest of all of his children were born. So Abdul Baha, Bahiya Khanum, Mirza Mehdi, and then one more child, Ali Muhammad. So this is not over yet. Anytime you see a red section in the chronology, it's problems. Either persecutions or torture, or everything is color coded in the chronology. So that's the color of the problems. And these 2 somber looking gentlemen are the Shah and Haji Mirza Aqasi in white on the right, the Grand Vizier of Muhammad Shah, who's in red on the left. Haji Mirza Aqasi was dubbed by Shoghi Effendi, wait for it, the Antichrist of the Babi revelation. I'm going to just say that again. Haji Mirza Aqasi was dubbed by Shoghi Effendi, and this is in quotes, the Babi revelation. So bloodthirsty was his hatred of the Babis. I mean, you saw what he did with a single person. Just think what he did with an entire religious community. The same thing. He did the same thing. He was the Grand Vizier of Muhammad Shah, and though he considered Mirza Buzurg his enemy, he respected Baha'u'llah. But he was insincere. After Mirza Buzurg's death in 1839, Haji Mirza Aqasi continued outwardly to show Baha'u'llah consideration and visited him in his home, addressing him like a son. One day, Haji Mirza Aqasi passed by a charming village belonging to Baha'u'llah called Kuch Hizar. And he was won over by the beauty of Kuchhizar, the abundant sources of water. The village was just idyllic. He decided he wanted to purchase this village for himself because at the time you could purchase a village. Good luck today. Anyway, he summoned Baha'u'lláh in order to purchase it, but Baha'u'lláh told him he could not sell the village because it did not belong exclusively to him. He shared ownership of the village with a number of other people, rich and poor, adults and some still minors. Baha'u'lláh suggested Haji Mirza Aqasi confirm the matter with the other owners and obtain their consent. When Haji Mirza Aqasi decided to acquire the village through fraudulent means, Baha'u'lláh transferred his ownership to one of the Shah's sisters who had expressed interest in the charming place. Haji Mirza Aqasi contested the situation, but the Shah ruled against him. Then Haji Mirza Aqasi showed his true colors and tried to discredit Baha'u'lláh, who successfully established his innocence. In every attack the Grand Vizier ventured against Baha'u'lláh, he came away defeated and humiliated. And just remember how I described him. This is not going to sit well with him. He's not going to forget this. So now we have some happy news after this sort of sad section, is the declaration of the Bab and the birth of Abdul Baha on the very same night. This is a map of this part of Persia that we are concerned with right now. You have Tehran in the north of the country, and then you have due southeast, you have Shiraz. And Shiraz is 430 miles south of Tehran. That's 700 kilometers. The Babi and Baha'i faiths are deeply intertwined. Following the 6,000-year Adamic cycle, which ended with Muhammad's dispensation, the Bab's mission was to inaugurate a wholly new dispensation in the progressive revelation of the world's religions. The Bab's brief ministry prepared the way for the dispensation of Baha'u'lláh and also inaugurated the Baha'i cycle. The Bab and Baha'u'lláh were the twin manifestations of God. They were born 2 years and 1 day apart, and their birthdays are celebrated as twin holy days. During the Bab's lifetime, they were in regular contact, and both Baha'u'lláh and the Bab suffered persecution, torture, and multiple imprisonments. The Bab and Baha'u'lláh are regarded by Baha'is as co-founders of the Baha'i faith. Another deep connection uniting the Babi and Baha'i faiths is that on the day that the Babi faith was born, inaugurating the Baha'i dispensation, so was Abdul Baha born. He who was destined by God to be the perfect exemplar and the very personification in his spiritual qualities, his character, and his every action of all of the teachings of Baha'u'lláh, the manifestation of God for today. So the perfect religion is born on the day of the perfect exemplar is born. Almost to receive the revelation in a way, you know? On the 22nd of May, 1844, 1 hour before sunset in Shiraz, the Bab declares his mission. So just to tell you, Abdul Baha is born at midnight, and the Bab declares his mission exactly 2 hours after sunset, but he receives the Mullah Hussein 1 hour before sunset. And so in the middle of the night, the Bab is still revealing to Mullah Hussein. And that's when Abdul Baha is born, exactly at midnight, just 430 miles south, 700 kilometers south. There, at the exact same time as the Babi religion is being born, so is Abdul Baha being born. It's such an extraordinary event. An hour before sunset on the 22nd of May, 1844, the Bab, born Sayyid Ali Muhammad Shirazi, a 25-year-old descendant from the Prophet Muhammad of pure and holy lineage, announced he was the Qa'im, the promised one of Islam, to the young Mullah Hussein, the first to believe in him. In his own words, Mullah Hussein testifies to that night. I sat spellbound by his utterance, oblivious of time and of those who awaited me. I was enthralled by the music of that voice, which rose and fell as he chanted, now swelling forth as he revealed verses of the Qayyum al-Asma, again acquiring ethereal, subtle harmonies as he uttered the prayers he was revealing. The revelation of the Bab had the effect of a thunderbolt on Mullah Hussein, who felt transfigured to the very depth of his soul by its dazzling splendor and overwhelming power. This instant spiritual transformation was the effect the Bab would have on countless of his early followers. That was the image for that vignette. So on the 23rd of May at midnight in Tehran, 430 miles north, Abdul Baha Abbas is born. This is a panorama of the city of Tehran in the 1930s. 6 hours into the enthralling, momentous encounter between the Bab and Mullah Hussein, Bahá'u'lláh Nasiyeh Khanum welcomed their third child, their son Abbas, meaning lion, into the world. He would later adopt the title Abdul Baha, meaning servant of Baha. It is a cherished miracle for Baha'is that on the day of the Baha'i dispensation was inaugurated, God ordained for its perfect exemplar Abdul Baha to be born only a few hours later. Now, when Abdul Baha was 2 months old, his father received a message from the Bab, and this is the story of how that message arrived to Baha'u'lláh. This is, we don't have an illustration for the theological school where Mullah Hussein stayed. So this is the drawing of another theological seminary where Baha'u'lláh stayed in Tehran, called the Madrisi Sadr. And it's from, you can find the reference on the chronology. It's from a photo essay, pictorial essay published by Giulio Savi in Baha'i World, and it's available on Baha'i Library online. So when the Bab dispersed the letters of the living, after all 18 letters of the living recognized him independently, around the 1st of July, he dispersed them. He gave Mullah Hussein, the first letter of the living, a crucial mission to travel to Tehran and find the secret hidden in that city, which, when made manifest, it shall turn the earth into a paradise. That is what Mullah Hussein went to find. So he relied wholly on faith. The Bab had specifically told Mullah Hussein to travel through Esfahan, Kashan, and Qum. And then once he had arrived in Tehran, Mullah Hussein rented a room in the theological seminary known as the Madrisi of Pai Minar, not far from Baha'u'llah's house. Each day, he would leave in the morning and return after sunset, never leaving his room at night. After overhearing Mullah Hussein speak to a divine of the theological college, a man named Mullah Muhammad Mualim of Noor was drawn to him by his passion and his eloquence. Around midnight, Mullah Muhammad Mualim called on Mullah Hussein, who was not only welcomed his visitor with affection and courtesy, but felt that this encounter was the reason for his stay at the seminary. As soon as he discovered Mullah Muhammad Mualim was from Noor, Mullah Hussein started asking pointed questions about the character and occupation of any outstanding member of the late Mirza Buzurg's family. He instantly knew he had found the secret truth hidden in Tehran and asked him to deliver a package to Baha'u'lláh and return with his response. At dawn, Mullah Muhammad Mualim set out to deliver the message from the Bab to Baha'u'lláh. Now, obviously, we do not have a photograph of the scroll, the original scroll that the Bab sent to Baha'u'lláh, but we have other tablets that the Bab addressed to Baha'u'lláh, and this is one of these tablets. It is a facsimile of the Bab's tablet addressed to him whom God shall make manifest, which Shoghi Effendi included in the Dawnbreakers as part of the tablets at the beginning of the Dawnbreakers. So as Mullah Muhammad Mualim was approaching Baha'u'llah's house, he recognized the younger brother of Baha'u'llah, Mirza Musa, who would have been 26 at the time, because Baha'u'llah was 27, 26 or 25 and a half, 26. So he saw Mirza Musa standing by the gate and conveyed Mullah Hussein's message. Mirza Musa returned a few moments later and welcomed him in. Mullah Muhammad offered Mirza Musa the scroll from the Bab, from Mullah Hussein on behalf of the Bab, and Mirza Musa laid it before Baha'u'lláh, who invited both men to sit. Baha'u'lláh unfolded the scroll, glanced at its content, and began to melodiously read aloud certain passages. After reading a page of the scroll, Baha'u'lláh turned to Mirza Musa and said, "Musa, what have you to say?" "Verily, I say Whoso believes in the Quran and recognizes its divine origin and yet hesitates, though it be for a moment, to admit that these soul-stirring words are endowed with the same regenerating power, has most assuredly erred in his judgment and has strayed far from the path of justice. And just like that, Baha'u'lláh had instantly become a Babi, wholly embracing the Bab's claim and mission. And just like that, like his adored older brother, Mirza Musa, had also become a Babi. That's just an amazing story. In response to Mullah Hussein, Baha'u'lláh entrusted Mullah Muhammad Mu'alim with a return gift for the Bab, a loaf of Russian sugar, a package of tea, and the expression of his appreciation and love. Mullah Muhammad Mu'alim delivered the gift to Mullah Hussein, who accepted it reverently, bowing his head and kissing the precious package. His joy and exultation were indescribable. He took Mullah Muhammad in his arms and kissed the eyes that had seen Baha'u'lláh, enjoining him to never speak a word of what he had witnessed and to pray for Baha'u'llah's protection. And what would Baha'u'lláh do immediately after becoming, when I say immediately, I mean immediately after becoming a Babi, he goes on a proclamation journey. And where? To his home district. Now, this is incredible. And I think it's incredible for one major reason, is because he leaves his only child who's ever survived childbirth or infancy with his wife alone in Tehran, puts them in the care of God and possibly also Mirza Musa. And then he goes to proclaim this new faith. And how much does he know about this new faith? He has a scroll. He has a scroll. And he goes on a proclamation journey, friends. This proclamation journey is so successful, you're going to be floored. So let's get started. This is Baha'u'llah's room in his house in Takur, Mazandaran, kept in its original condition in the 1930s. After Baha'u'lláh became a Babi, he immediately arose on a 2-month teaching journey to his native district of Noor in July and August 1844. All of the innate qualities that had been evident in his youth, his mastery of argument, his knowledge, his eloquence, his profound understanding of theological subject, became keener, more acute, more penetrating when they turned to the defense and promulgation of the Babi faith. Baha'u'lláh soon became the leading exponent of the newborn Babi faith. Leading exponent. I think him and probably Tahiri, because Tahiri began proclaiming instantly, and she sent challenges to all the divines in Karbala. So, but you know, there was no one else like them, like Baha'u'lláh or Tahiri, in quickly the intensity of the proclamation. Mullah Hussein, as instructed, sent the Bab a detailed report describing Baha'u'llah's embrace of the Babi faith and how he immediately arose to proclaim the cause in Noor and his astonishing success. The Bab received the report on October 10th, 1844, and was filled with profound joy for days afterwards. His uncle often heard the Bab exultingly repeating the words, "How marvelous, how exceedingly marvelous is that which has occurred between the months of Jamadi and Rajab, July and August." So this is a gorgeous 17th century illumination of the opening verses of the first chapter of the Holy Quran, the Surah Al-Fatiha. The surah, this is the surah which Baha'u'lláh is in the middle of revealing a commentary on when 2 students arrive. Now, Baha'u'lláh is a manifestation of God. He has just embraced the cause of the Bab, but he is also, what is he doing? He's revealing. Now, we have lost most of Baha'u'llah's revelation. We have this poem that is now very famous called the Rash Amma, which is revealed in the Siyat Shal. There is a lengthy tablet that was just published by Adib Masumian on Facebook. He is a provisional translator that dates from 1851. So this is exciting because now we had 1852, now we have 1851. Now we see here that Baha'u'lláh is revealing a commentary on the Quran. Maybe one day we will find earlier earlier revelation from Baha'u'lláh. How exciting is that? Mullah Muhammad was the son of Baha'u'llah's relative and friend, the now deceased famed Mujtahid of Yalrud, the one who had had 2 dreams of Baha'u'llah. He had taken over for his father, and pressured by his students to challenge Baha'u'llah's message from a doctrinal standpoint, he sent his 2 best students to a city called Darkala in Noor, Baha'u'llah's winter resort on the Caspian Sea. When the men arrived, Baha'u'llah was revealing a commentary on the opening chapter of the Quran entitled The 7 Verses of Repetition. When the 2 men heard Baha'u'llah's persuasive eloquence, luminous discourse, and extraordinary delivery on such a lofty theme, they were utterly powerless to challenge him. One of them arose, walked back, and stood by the door reverently. He would later tell his friend that he felt powerless to question Baha'u'llah. All of his questions had vanished from his mind. Both men sent to challenge Baha'u'llah had become Babis upon simply encountering him. But Baha'u'llah's fame would grow and grow during these 2 months. This is another photograph of Baha'u'llah's home in Takur, Mazindaran, taken in the 1930s. News of Mullah Muhammad's 2 envoys converting to the Babi faith instantly upon meeting Baha'u'llah spread like wildfire through the district of Noor, and it roused the inhabitants from their lethargy. Soon, every type of person was flocking to Baha'u'llah's home: Muslim clergy, state officials, traders, peasants, many of whom became Babis. Some of them told Baha'u'llah that the triumph of the faith would be complete if Mullah Muhammad himself accepted the cause. Baha'u'llah responded that his sole purpose in coming to Noor had been to proclaim the Babi faith, and that he intended to visit Mullah Muhammad in the nearby village of Sadat Abad and teach him the faith. So he was in Darkala, which is at the top of the map. And as you can see, Sadat Abad is only 2.5 miles or 4 kilometers away from Darkala. As soon as he had spoken these words, Baha'u'llah started for Sadat Abad, very nearby, trailed by a number of his followers. Mullah Muhammad received Baha'u'llah with great ceremony, but Baha'u'llah immediately and clearly stated his purpose. I have not come to this place to pay you an official visit or formal visit. My purpose is to enlighten you regarding a new and wondrous message, divinely inspired and fulfilling the promise given to Islam. Baha'u'llah offered to clear up any misconceptions the Mujtahid had about the Babi faith, which were hindering him from recognizing the truth. But Mullah Muhammad's response was patronizing and dismissive. He said, I undertake no action unless I first consult the Quran. He explained to Baha'u'llah that his technique for solving difficulties was to open the Quran at a random page and consulting the first verse of that page, which informed him of the course of action he was going to take. Baha'u'llah said he had absolutely no objection to his method, and the Mujtahid called for a Quran. So he opened it, and his eyes fell on a verse, and then he shut the holy book, saying he deemed it inadvisable to proceed further with this matter. Unwilling to humiliate the man further, Baha'u'llah rose, asked to be excused, and bid Mullah Muhammad a cordial farewell. But you see, Baha'u'llah, the thing about Baha'u'llah is that there are a handful of people who knew he was a manifestation of God before everyone else. And those people were Abdul Baha when he was 9, Tahirih when she visited his home 2 years after this, and the dervish right now, this dervish right now. And I want you to keep in mind, this is how the manifestation of God is talking to a dervish. This is how the dervish is talking to the manifestation of God. And this is how much the manifestation of God loves the way the dervish is speaking to him. Just when you encounter people who are being a little bit less than open-minded, think about how open-minded Baha'u'llah is when he hears what the dervish is telling him. One day, as Baha'u'llah was traveling through Noor on a riding excursion with his followers, he came upon a dervish seated by the roadside, by the bank of a brook, almost exactly like the painting. Hello, it's so cool. And eating food on a fire he had kindled. Baha'u'llah approached the young dervish and lovingly asked, tell me, well, first of all, he got off his horse to speak to a dervish. 99.9% of people would just pass on a dervish by. But the manifestation of God for today stopped and got off and asked him. And not only asked him, he approached him and he lovingly asked him, "Tell me, dervish, what is it you are doing?" The young man replied bluntly, "I'm engaged in eating God. I am cooking God and I'm burning him." Baha'u'lláh loved the young man's simple manners and candid reply. He began a conversation with the dervish, speaking to him freely and tenderly. After a short time, Baha'u'llah's transformative effect on the dervish was complete. He had become enlightened as to the true nature of God. His mind was freed from the idle fancies of dervish culture, and he recognized Baha'u'llah's true station as a manifestation of God. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this dervish because we know who he is. But I want to just tell you that you have to think of Baha'u'lláh as, if you've ever been to the Holy Land and you walk into the shrines to pray, you can smell that attar of roses. You know that they have someone put like a drop of attar of roses just so that you can smell it on entering. They put it in very specific places. And so I want you to imagine the power of Baha'u'lláh on other people, kind of like the power of like a large pot of attar of roses in a room. There's not a single square millimeter, inch, or whatever that's going to not be infused with that perfume. And I think that being near a manifestation of God was like being near a attar of roses. You could not be near a manifestation of God and not know I am in the presence of something incredibly powerful and holy. The only thing I can at all compare it to is that the perfect smell of attar of roses, the way it fills a room. And even if you don't want to smell it, the only way you're going to not smell it is if you plug your nose, and you stop breathing, And that, I think, is how powerful it was to be in the aura of a manifestation of God. It was just like this. And this dervish, he was fully aware and he recognized his station. Now, this dervish's name was Mustafa Big-i Sananji. He was originally from Sanandaj, nearly 300 miles away in Kurdistan, 490 miles away. And I'm telling you, I've written 3 chronologies, and between Azerbaijan and Kurdistan, some of the most amazing Baha'is and letters of the living come from those areas. There are extraordinary believers, very firm, unbreakable, unimpeachable, uncorruptible. After Mustafa Bigi Sananji recognized Baha'u'lláh, he adopted the name Mazjub, the attracted, and started following Baha'u'lláh, his beloved, chanting verses of a mystical love song he composed spontaneously, singing the praises of Baha'u'lláh. The refrain of Mazjub poem went as follows: "Thou art the day star of guidance, thou art the light of truth. Unveil thyself to men, O revealer of the truth." In later years, Mazjub's poem would be widely circulated among Sufis, but no one knew it was about Baha'u'lláh. Mazjub alone had seen Baha'u'llah's true station, one of a select, rare handful of people who would be able to perceive it before his revelation in the Siyah. So Baha'u'llah's 2-month proclamation journey in Noor in the summer of 1844, immediately after he embraced the Babi faith, took place approximately 2 months after the declaration of the Bab, and it yielded far-reaching results, infusing the movement behind the newborn dispensation with a tremendous and remarkable energy. Baha'u'lláh had won over the hearts of the people of Noor. He had stirred their souls to their depths, had enrolled many of them into the Babi faith through his magnetic eloquence, the purity of his life, the dignity of his bearing, his masterful arguments, his constant, all-encompassing loving kindness, attar of roses. Nabil testified to the impact Baha'u'lláh had on Noor, seemed to quicken even the stones and the trees. This is Nabil speaking, such was the effect of words and deeds as he, Baha'u'lláh, went about preaching the cause and revealing its glory to its countrymen in Noor, that the very stones and trees of the district seemed to have been quickened by the waves of spiritual power which emanated from his person. All things seemed to be endowed with a new and more abundant life. All things seemed to be proclaiming aloud, behold, the beauty of God has been made manifest. Arise, for he has come in all his glory. The Babis of Noor consolidated the solid foundations left by Baha'u'lláh by continuing to teach and spread the Babi faith. Many were persecuted in later years, and some became martyrs for the cause. The province of Mazandaran, and more specifically the district of Noor, have the distinction of being the first in Persia to passionately embrace the message of the Bab. Noor, nestled in the mountains of Mazandaran, caught the first rays of the sun of the Babi faith that had arisen in Shiraz through the efforts of Baha'u'lláh, the one destined to make that sun shine in its full splendor. And that's it for today. I have time for questions if anyone has questions.